Hi, everybody. It's the Sound Booth Theater Live Show. Hope you're all doing well. I don't know what that voice is, but I'm excited to get started today. We're introducing the classics, a new segment with some Dostoevsky. I've only read one book by Dostoevsky, and I think I wasn't in the right frame of mind when I read it to really comprehend what was going on. What's up with the color? Is it always this weird colored? It was called Notes from the Underground. But it's like really abstract, I'd say. It's a very, very messed up book, and I don't remember too much about it except it was difficult to comprehend. I think it was written in first person, and the main character he just kind of seemed spastic, just really weird. But reading, I've now read the first two chapters of Crime and Punishment, and I was really surprised at how much more put together, how much more structured the book is than Notes from the Underground. And chapter 2 just has an amazing, gut-wrenching scene that I will be reading for you today for the classics segment. But also today we have, first, we're going to be investigating Mr. Billy... I keep calling him that now because I keep thinking of Billy D. Williams. But William D. Aaron's super sales on superheroes. And then we're going to go to A.J. Mayall's The Art of Madness. We're going to continue that one. And then we'll do the classics segment with Dostoevsky's Crime and Punishment. And then our last segment, Cringe Theater, will be wrapping up Katy Perry versus Jason. Or is it Jason versus Katy Perry? Jason versus Katy Perry. So thanks for coming and hanging out with us. And let's get started here. Now, first, what I want to do is just a little bit of advertising. Remember, guys, Hell's Rejects by M.R. Forbes is still available on Audible, and it's so good. It looks like it's getting bought up a lot, but there's like no reviews. There's like 2 reviews. I don't know what it is. I think the people who just rush to buy it, they're not worried about reviews. I'm not sure why. But then there's like a few people who kind of like reviewing things, and then they'll pick it up through Audiobook Boom, and that's how you get reviews. Maybe I need to talk to Paul from audiobookreviewer.com about this one. But it's one of my favorite projects. I just finished The Devil's Due, which is book 3 of this series. Last week I finished it. But it's just kind of sitting there waiting to be published because M.R. Forbes wants to coordinate better with Podium Publishing. Tides of War, which is the 3rd book of the Rebellion series, which I worked on for M.R. Forbes and Podium. Book 3 of that is coming out May 16th. So keep an eye out for that one. But M.R. Forbes wants to coordinate with Podium with these releases so that the audio of each of these series don't step on each other's toes as far as sales. So he wants to wait till, I think, maybe June to release Devil's Due, which is disappointing for me, because I really like that book. I really like this series, and I wish you guys could keep listening to it, as fast as you want to, as fast as I can shell them out. But, I don't know. He's trying to make a make a marketing decision here that may or may not turn out in his favor. We'll see. But Hell's Rejects and Fire and Brimstone, Book 2, are both available on Audible right now, so be sure to run and pick those up if you haven't yet. And also, I'm just constantly trying to push this book because I love it so much. Stone Cold Bastards by Jake Bible. I will be working on a lit RPG for Jake Bible called Everrealm very soon. I believe we're due to start at the beginning of July. Oh wait, no, I had to push some projects around in my schedule, so I actually will be starting Everrealm the last week of June. So that's coming up faster than I thought at first. It's like a week and a half from now. So I'm excited to get started on that. But go pick up Stone Cold Bastards, guys. It's so fantastic. It's standalone. It's urban fantasy. It's about gargoyles and demons, which I never see that anywhere in the urban fantasy indie market. So check it out. He really does a fantastic job with the writing, and the characters are so much fun. They were so much fun to voice. Very diverse set of grotesques that come from all over the world. It was a pleasure to do that one. So, and I think that's all I'm pushing for today. Yep, that's it. So, now we move on to our first request. Little spinny thing? What kind of little spinny thing are you experiencing, Ian? Is that Ian? That is Ian, right? I get your guys' names mixed up. Super sales on superheroes. So this kind of, I don't know, William D. Arand doesn't really do much marketing as far as I can tell. He just kind of, here you go, release a new book. And then everyone just jumps on it. Last time I checked, which was a few hours ago, this book's already got 22 reviews, or 22 ratings on Kindle, in the Kindle market. I believe the sales rank is like 500 something. People are gobbling it up. It's like at a 4.7 average rating right now. And I've read the first 6 chapters, and I'm pretty impressed with it. It's different from Other Life Dreams, which you should also buy, by the way, if you haven't. It's on Audible. It's different than Other Life Dreams, but it's still kind of got, you can still tell. You can still tell it's William D. Arand. It's still kind of got that harem-y feel, but from what I've read from reviews, it doesn't go that far with it. But it is way creepier, and it's actually set in a real world. Cool and twisted is right. It is twisted. It's messed up. It's in a world. Well, what I'm gonna do, I'm just gonna start reading because, like I said, I've only read through 6 chapters, so I can't really give you that much from talking about it, but I can introduce you to the book. And what I'm gonna do, I'm just gonna read chapter 1 of this one. And I'm going to recommend you go pick it up on Kindle if you don't want to wait for the audio version. William did ask me if I want to do the audio for this a while back, and he gave me the beta version, and so I started reading a little bit, but I never really got that far, and I kind of neglected it accidentally, but then when it finally, he just kind of stealthily brought it out on Kindle, I was like, fuck, I need to read this now. And so I jumped on it. I read the first 6 chapters, and I was like, yes, okay, I have to do this. It's so weird. And the way that it's lit RPG, I don't know. To me, it may not be lit RPG. It's almost like it's thumbing its nose at lit RPG. Like William is trying as hard as he can to find a way to make something as far away from lit RPG while still like using enough elements to maybe qualify. which I like. That's what I like when people experiment and try and push the envelope a little bit and test the limits of what a genre can be. So this is like a blend of lit RPG and superhero, which actually Jeff Sproul's Sigil Online series is doing, but it's actually that one is actually more traditional, as if the players are playing a VR version of City of Heroes. I don't know if you played that when that first came out. That was like early 2000s when that came out. I know a buddy who actually completely destroyed his college career for a year playing that game. But yeah. So here goes. We're gonna do super sales on superheroes, chapter one. Chap. The whole book is by William D. Arand, but yeah, chapter one. Oh, and I'm gonna be using the main character's name is Felix. Um I'm going to I think I'm just gonna come up with a new voice for this guy. I haven't really done a character quite like him. He kind of reminds me of the MC from Other Life Dreams, but he's got it together a little bit more. So, and he's a real dude. Well, technically, compared to never mind. You'll see. Chapter 1. Not so black market. Felix couldn't keep himself still. He practically gyrated with nervous energy. He jumped at every noise in the alley, from a mouse scratching at cardboard to a street lamp. Excuse me. From a mouse scratching at cardboard to a street lamp that started to buzz. This is a bad idea. Stupid idea, trying to buy something from the black market. Well, the not-so-black market anymore. What exactly do you call a black market when a supervillain runs your city? He very nearly shouted in alarm when the garage door behind him opened abruptly, the chain rattling as it moved. A black man in a dark brown trench coat was waiting for him on the inside. He looked about Felix's age. Well, maybe not. He's a bit younger, maybe like 5 years younger. Call it 25? He looked like... Uh-oh. Is anyone else having problems watching on Twitch? You used to work on City of Heroes? Like on the actual video game? That's AJ Mayall, by the way, talking to us. Sorry, I'm waiting for... Okay, everyone else... Okay, so he's fine on Twitch. All right. I'm sorry you're having problems with that. That's really cool. Okay. He looked like any number of people you'd pass on the street and never give a second glance to. He might just barely hit 6 foot, or so Felix thought, measuring him against the frame of the garage door. The man's posture was relaxed, his hands in his pockets, watching Felix with a partial frown. "You're a little early there, Felix," the man said in a smooth baritone. "It is Felix, right?" "Yeah, Felix. Felix Campbell. Pleasure to meet you," he said, holding out his hand. The man stared back at him, his eyes flicking from Felix's hand and back to his face. I came early with the van," he said, gesturing to the unmarked vehicle next to him. "So I noticed." "I didn't want to be late. I can't stand being late. Though I think coming early didn't do me any favors for my nerves. Sorry," Felix apologized lamely. The man smirked at that, and then chuckled softly. "Yeah, I hear that." Oh, sorry. I thought I was looking at the chat and I thought someone was having issues. Paragon Studios hoodie. That's funny. Okay, so now I get... Anyway, never mind. That's the first book of Sigil Online is called Paragons. So, obviously, Jeff Sproul played a lot of City of Heroes. I need to stop interrupting myself. This is a story, damn it. The man smirked at that, and then chuckled softly. Yeah, I hear that. I wouldn't want to stand around in this alley much longer either. Snidely's come prowling often enough. Come on. Snidely? Felix asked, stepping quickly to catch up to the man. Felix was by no means a short man, but nor was he tall. Sitting at an unimpressive 5'8", he was as average as you could be. The clack of the man's polished shoes echoed dully. Realizing how immaculately dressed the man was, Felix felt like a slob in his work uniform, minus name tag. Snidely? Snidely Whiplash? You know, villain? Great stash? Do-rights and Snideleys? Never mind. The man shook his head. Sorry, I don't watch TV. What channel is it on? Felix asked. Then he shook his head. He had to get this done and get it done right. He needed this. Actually, forget that. What do I call you? You don't, said the man, stepping up to a rectangular wooden crate. On top of that crate was a black box and a sheet of white paper. I call you. Felix took a breath and then pulled out a wad of money from his pocket. This deal had cost him $2,000. What little he had left after that was in his hand in a roll, amounting up to $300. All that he had till his next paycheck. Then maybe you can call me when you get similar merchandise in the future. Damn, that sounded good. At least, I think it did. The man tilted his head to one side and then smiled widely at Felix, showing a set of bright white teeth. Taking the money from Felix's hand, he nodded his head, thumbing back the 20s. Well, all right. I can do that. Call me Marcus. It'll do for today, said the man now known as Marcus, putting the wad of money in his pocket. As for the market, no buyers for this stuff. You're already paying basement price of what it costs to get it here and out of where it... You're already paying basement price of what it costs to get it here and out of where it was with only a slim margin for us. So I'll keep you in mind. But no promises. Marcus turned and picked up the black box and the paper, then handed both to Felix. Ownership papers and one owner's box. We call them pits. Go ahead and stick your finger in that hole, Marcus explained, holding out the box. Shouldn't the seller put their finger in first for these? Felix had heard about them. Apparently, pits were well regarded for transactions among supers, since they had a magical element to them. Not for this purchase. For future purchases, we can just use this pit again. Now go ahead and get that paw up here. Felix lifted his index finger and slipped it into the hole. He felt the sting before he even thought about what was going to happen. All done. You'll feel that tomorrow, Marcus said, shaking his head with a grin. Turning his head, Marcus whistled at a forklift that was sitting dormant in the side of the warehouse. Felix flinched as the vehicle came to life. He hadn't even noticed it. In fact, he hadn't even looked around at what he'd walked into. Way to go, idiot. Marcus pointed to the van. You go hop in and wait. We'll get this loaded up in a second. The man hesitated for a second, then continued. You know, I'm glad someone's buying this. We were considering tossing it into the river, but that never works out. I should think not. It wouldn't be as bad as, say, lead, but it'd eventually create some problems with the water, Felix said, nodding his head. A big shipment of bismuth really could cause problems. I mean, how do you explain buying a shipment of heavy metal that then ends up in a river? Marcus looked at him in a strange way at that, and then laughed with a wave of his hand. See you later, Felix. You're a strange cat. Felix wasn't quite sure what to make of that exchange, but he waved back. Later, Marcus." Felix hurried off back to the panel van and got in. The forklift operator went about his business and had Felix loaded up in under a minute. There was a smack on the rear door, and then the garage started sliding shut a second later. Felix adjusted his mirror, catching a look at himself in the process. He looked pale as ever. His gray eyes stared back at him, listless. Even his hair looked defeated, limp. It hung on him in its way, the brown strands overly worked with hair gel. He looked incredibly tired for a 30-year-old. "We're changing that. Starting with this. We can do this. We saved, we scrimped, and now we'll succeed." Popping the radio back on, Felix pulled out into the alleyway. Tonight we have a guest speaker from our new leader's cabinet. Please Felix cursed as he jammed the brakes. A superhero in a costume stumbled out in front of him from a side alley. The van clipped the caped crusader and sent him spinning. At the same instant, another costumed weirdo appeared. That person pounced on the hero as they stumbled back from the van and began plunging a knife into their chest over and over. Felix kept his eyes straight on the road and hit the gas again. "Didn't see anything. Didn't see a super being murdered. Nope, not a thing," Felix said, staring straight ahead. The closest Felix had been to crime was watching the loan shark across the street from his work operate. Even that felt too close for comfort sometimes. Ever since the supers in charge of the city's defense had lost, it had become open season. Anyone not in line with the new power structure was free game. Which was pretty much every and any superhero out there. There'd been a mass exodus and only a few had remained. And of those who remained, the vast majority were poor slobs who thought they could tough it out till relief came. In fact, a lot of people said the relief had come at the same time as the original attack. Which made sense. No one else ever came. Felix doubted anyone else would come at this point. For people like Felix, the everyday man, life hadn't changed much from the turnover. Ooh, I'm all wrinkled. Look at me. That's awful, guys. Vice laws, like slavery, prostitution, and drugs, were legalized. They were now given government protection and were expected to meet the same or similar regulations that other markets had. And let's not forget taxes. Taxes were of course levied on all those vices. Being legal, the price had rapidly inflated, crashed, then flatlined. The city raked in the cash and started immediately spending it back on city programs, like drug rehabilitation centers. Then Skipper, the villain now in charge, had promptly lowered income taxes. Since there were no federal taxes anymore, that meant people overall were paying significantly less, unless they were partaking of the new legal frivolities. What's up? Osup? That is Nevin Iliev, I believe. I'm sorry, guys. I'm very bad at remembering your screen names for Twitch, but I'm pretty sure. Which set off another round of vice spending and purchasing in general. Suddenly, not only were the heroes not receiving support, but if anything, they were being asked to leave, or hunted and killed.
To be here, Mike. I'd like to start off by reminding everyone we have a 10 grand reward for anyone with information leading to the capture of a hero. 5 grand for a kill with the body as proof.
Or hunted, apparently. The audience cheered at that reminder. Felix had heard something about that, but had brushed it off as rumors. Felix had heard something about that, but had brushed it off as rumors. Apparently, it wasn't.
As our government is only here in this city, we need to secure ourselves. The longer we have threats inside, the longer it takes us to begin to branch outward, said the guest. I heard that one of the first cities we'll be taking is... Now, Mike. You know I can't talk about that. Though, speaking of targets, I'd like to warn our listeners out there. Violence towards the other humanoid races, such as dwarves, beastkin, or anything other than a human, won't be tolerated. It'll be punished severely.
No arguments here. Glad to hear justice will be applied evenly. I heard the old federal government isn't even bothering us anymore. That they've left the recapture of our city to the Guild of Heroes. Is that true?
It is. It is. Skipper is regularly on patrol and watching for anything. So far, they haven't retaken an inch.
Tired of the political whitewash he was sure was going on, Felix flipped the radio to an 80s station and drove onward. Shutting the door with a thump, Felix looked around the spacious garage. Much like every other area in this house, it had the feel of his family. It was their house, after all. He was merely living here as the clock ticked down on them, being proclaimed dead. Death in absentia. They were at year 7 of 10. His aunt and uncle had simply up and left one night when Felix was 23, give or take a few months, leaving him alone in a home that had been paid off completely. Their bank accounts, stock, and everything else was being managed by a group of lawyers through a trust. Oh, shit. Billy D. Arand is here. Selfless hero.
In the house?
He had rights in the trust to ensure they weren't spending money frivolously. I think this sentence means he had rights in the trust. He had rights in the trust to ensure he wasn't spending money frivolously, but he had no rights to the money itself. Sighing, Felix moved around to the rear of the van. This'll change everything. Once I get this squared away, Felix said to himself, opening the rear doors, then I can quit. Quit that hellhole of a job and just do whatever. Yeah, whatever. Sit around, pick my nose, and watch game shows all day. Felix grabbed the edge of the rectangular box and heaved once. It slid out by a foot. It was at this moment that he realized he had no way to get it from the bed of the van to the garage floor. A quick hunt of the garage got him to the motorcycle ramp his uncle owned. Wedging it against the van and getting it in a stable place, he heaved on the crate again. Groaning, it slid free of the van, hit the motorcycle ramp, and slid down it. Wood cracked and popped when it hit the floor. It managed to come to a stop the same moment it came off the ramp. Felix sighed and closed the van doors and put the ramp back. Getting a hold of the latch at the top and bottom of the box, he took a slow breath, then unbolted them at the same time and tipped the lid backwards. Looking inside eagerly, Felix felt dumbstruck. Instead of a load of bismuth, which he'd hoped to turn into gold with his own superpower, there was a corpse. The face looked like it had gone through a factory furnace, like something out of those old slasher films his uncle loved. There were no eyes. Dry, empty sockets gaped at him. There were no ears, but instead 2 nubs of flesh no bigger than the tip of his pinky. 2 gaping holes sat in the middle of the ruined face, right where a nose would be. Should have been. No lips remained to cover the broken and shattered teeth. It was a real horror show.
No more,
mumbled the not corpse, almost like a mantra.
No more, no more, no more, no more, no more.
Felix looked down at the ruined husk of what had once been a human being and pressed his hands to his face. This wasn't something his brain could comprehend right now.
No more,
the body whispered. His brain slowly lurched into gear, and a thought sent him for the passenger door. Popping open the door, he grabbed the paperwork and started to read over it. Paperwork was on the rise as of late since the taxmen had to collect taxes, and taxes needed accurate paperwork. National ID cards, too. Finally, he found the listed items sold. No mention of bismuth came up at all. Only the purchase of a slave and one slave control box. One superheroine, to be specific, one previously owned by the government. That's a woman? Holy crap! Felix felt his thoughts starting to spiral rapidly out of control. Hunching over, he put his head between his knees and took some deep breaths. Right when the world stopped spinning crazily, he stood back up and breathed more regularly. Setting the paperwork down back next to the pit, he considered his options. His money was already spent and gone. Even though he'd clearly received the wrong package, it wouldn't be good for him to whine about it. They'd just laugh at him and ask him what the problem was. He'd accepted the bill of goods as it was. Who was to say this wasn't exactly what he wanted? Maybe this won't be so bad after all. I wanted to transmute bismuth to gold. What if she can do more than that? What if she can make gold? Or find gold? This might actually be even better than he'd expected, provided that he could fix her. That is, if he could keep her alive long enough to fix her. A super with a decent power set would be worth a lot more than gold, especially in the current environment where slaves were legal. He started to think of any number of things supers could do and how he could profit from it. Closing the passenger door, he walked back to the crate. Can you hear me? He asked her. There was no response. Her chest rose and fell in labored breaths. Now that he looked at her body, he found the rest of it as horribly disfigured as her face. It looked like her fingers had been removed. Her breasts, most of her skin. She was a real mess. Could he even fix her? That's probably better. His face twisted into a frown as he tilted his head to consider her. He hadn't used up his power today. It wasn't as if he had any plans to use it before he went to sleep either. In fact, if he was up past midnight when his power set reset, he could try again. Solidifying his decision, he concentrated on her. She was his. She was his. He owned her. She was his property. Felix was actually a superhero or villain candidate. He could modify any item he owned, make it new, change it into another substance, make it better or worse quality. Anything, really. The scope was incredible. The problem was that the more he modified an object, the more it would take from his power pool. And his power pool barely had enough juice in it to fix a crack in a toilet. Felix had always thought of it like batteries. Most heroes and villains had a pretty decent-sized battery. There were those who had smaller ones, and those who had larger ones. If he had to compare himself in relative terms to others, Felix was a AAA battery that had been left outside in a puddle. The lowest measured superhero or villain before Felix would be akin to a golf cart battery. Up to this point, the best use of his superpower had been repair jobs. Mostly maintenance, to tell the truth. He couldn't modify or change big objects, but he could limit wear and tear for sure. He'd tried minor transmutations with success, leading to this moment here and now with the hope to change bismuth into gold. In using his power, the change would simply occur over a few seconds. The precursor to that, though, when he used his power, was a virtual window that appeared in front of him. It had the look of a checklist sheet with sliders on either. It had the look of a checklist sheet with sliders on one other side. Why does that fuck me up? It had the look of a checklist sheet with sliders on one other side. It was all very strange, really. Focusing on his unexpected guest, Felix struggled to activate his power. To ultimately no result. Scratching at his cheek, Felix thought on the problem. She was his possession, legally. Up to this point, that had been all he had to do. Taking a different approach, he tried using a character sheet. Generic, and yet taking root from hundreds upon hundreds of role-playing games he'd played. Why not? He saw it in his mind's eye first. A piece of white paper. At the top, there was basic information and vital stats, things that anyone would have regardless of being a super or not. Below that, all of the powers, abilities, and functions that made them unique. These sheets would contain everything from blindness, being sick, or even having a genetic disposition to heart attacks. Then he opened his eyes and saw the exact same form he'd been visualizing. Then he opened his eyes and saw the exact same form he'd been visualizing. I did it again. Then he opened his eyes and saw the exact same form he'd been visualizing floating in front of him. Excuse me. Only he could see it. When he tried to explain it to his family, they'd thought he'd gone crazy at first. Only after showing them an example of what he could do, where he took a faded and dirty penny and made it new, did they believe him. At first, he'd thought perhaps he was indeed crazy. What kind of superpower presented itself like this? This wasn't a normal power. In fact, it had been classified as unique. Nothing even similar. Felix had become contemplative after that information had been given to him by the guild. To him, that meant that he either was the one doing the visualizing. This is a new phenomenon for me. To him, that meant that he either was the one doing the visuals. Seriously? I feel like I have a bone marrow condition that's making me say it this way. To him, that meant that he either was the one doing the visualizing of his power, or another entity had set it up for him. Both answers disturbed him. The reason why Felix had never gone any further with his talent was his lack of power. At the bottom right of the sheet floating in front of him was where the cost would be to make the modifications he wanted. They were always more than what he had available for anything useful. After much experimentation, he knew he had roughly 150 points he could spend on things before he ran out. He could always tell if he ran out because the confirm button would simply go away. That was a pretty small number when compared to the things he could change, like turning a table into solid gold. With a sudden thought, he tried to flip to the second page that his power normally offered up, the real meat and potatoes of his power, the upgrade page. The viewing window changed. It now looked like something out of a role-playing game character creation page. He could modify anything about her, providing he paid the power cost. Strength, intelligence, reflexes, weapon skills, languages, skills, height, weight, senses, anything and everything that you could think of. The list was extensive and a touch overwhelming. The possibilities for a living person were infinitely more complex than a simple item. Felix shook his head to clear it. He'd have to worry about that later, after he'd fixed all the problems. Maybe try to limit what came up to what he wanted to change. Focusing back on the here and now, Felix started to read through the list of debuffs this person was suffering from. It looked endless at first. He began to feel sick at the problems listed. Some of them were rather horrible. She'd apparently been cut open and had a number of her organs removed. He couldn't even begin to think of a reason for that. "Wah!" he groaned. "That's just sick perversion, isn't it? Who the hell did this?" This wasn't going to be a quick fix. It'd take months to spend enough power to make her human again, let alone whole. That wasn't even mentioning how long it'd take to get her back into a condition to be useful. It'd take months to make enough money to buy a shipment of bismuth again anyways. Besides,
Not like I'm doing anything else with this power. I could clean up some coins. Scrub the shower. Ooh, impressive. Fine. Let's Frankenstein's monster this shit. Felix grunted and looked to the sheet again. The cheapest thing to change, and which would refund some points he could work with, was putting her in a coma. A single thought later, and coma appeared in the debuff list. 100 points with a negative sign popped up in the bottom right corner. Flicking through multiple options, he found that replacing her teeth would be relatively simple and cheap. Her lips came at a discounted price, since it was all in the same area and some of the reconstruction could bleed into the other. Then he was spent. That was all he had. For a start, it was great. He'd take another crack at it when midnight rolled around and his points reset. Before he clicked the confirm changes button at the bottom, he stopped. Below the confirmation button was a slider, one he hadn't imagined or put there. No time like the present to figure it out. The slider simply read, draw, and read from 0% to 100%. It was set at 0 right now. Moving it to 100%, he checked to see if anything had changed. Nothing. Back to 0. No change. Back to 100. Still no change. Leaving it at 100, Felix shrugged his shoulders. Maybe he could figure it out tomorrow. For now, he'd leave it at 100 to see if anything changed. Mentally popping the confirm button, he looked up to the body in the crate. Instantly, teeth began to straighten themselves, growing anew. Where teeth were missing, new teeth broke through the gum line. In 10 seconds, she had a healthy set of lovely teeth. Then her lips started to wrap and fan out as they regrew themselves next, until finally she had a pair of full lips hiding those resplendent teeth. Felix sighed and looked around the garage. He had an hour or so to wait till midnight. Going inside the house didn't appeal to him. It was dark. It was empty. Dark. Devoid of life. Here in the garage, with what was essentially a corpse, at least he wasn't alone. When midnight finally rolled around, Felix felt like his skin caught fire for an instant. It wasn't painful, but it certainly wasn't comfortable. Normally, when his power reset, it only felt like he'd caught a mild sunburn. This time felt like he'd been in a furnace. Felix popped open the window and then hesitated. He might as well get it out of the way now. He'd been thinking while waiting for midnight. If he couldn't fix some of the truly awful things, what was the point? He selected the box for blindness, left eye, and looked to the corner. 600 points. Despair welled up in him. Eyeballs aren't simple things like teeth or lips. They're intricate organs and... The confirm button was lit up. Okay, so that was creepy and weird, and thoroughly enjoyable, because creepy and weird is awesome to me. I don't know why. But yeah, William, we're going to have to set up a schedule for that book, because I'm definitely on board. But yeah, thanks for letting me read that for you. Hopefully you can use the replay to push it on some more people. Don't apologize. I like the weird, man. You know that. By the way, guys, if you're enjoying this stream, thanks so much for hanging out and watching. Also, share. Get on Facebook. Tell people what's going on here. All right, so our next request. We are revisiting The Art of Madness by A.J. Mayall. Adric is in the chat right now, so say hi to him. Last time,
woke up 5 hours early to tune in. Wow. Well, I'm glad I gave you a reason to rise and shine. Uh, so last time we met our main character. He's here with the red hair and blue hands. He's looking pretty smooth here. A little bit douchey too, just a little bit. I think that's just part of his character. Yeah. So I had a lot of fun with the first chapter. We're gonna finish up the first chapter. It's pretty short after what we've already been through, but so far we've seen that our main character here, Phoenix, he's got crazy. So far, I can only say like telepathy. He like took apart this van that these guys were trying to escape in after they robbed the coffee shop that's across the street from his office. He's a PI. He's a private investigator, and he doesn't have to license his powers in this superhero world where every other superhero has to license their powers. He doesn't have to do his because it's not really detectable. He kind of sneaks through the world appearing as a civilian. But what's cool about this particular character, I think, is that he's in this, gritty, noir-feeling world, and he's nice and chipper. He's excited to be there. He's excited about his powers, and he's just trying to find success with his business, and that's all that really matters to him. I don't know. It's a great contrast between the main character and the rest of the world. So, where we left off, Phoenix had just interviewed this guy who suspected his wife of cheating, and basically, he explained his situation, and then Phoenix convinced him to pay him a lot of money for the job. So, where are we gonna? Oh, here it is. Okay, so let me see. Can't remember the exact words that were last. Sorry, guys, I just got to check the document he sent me the first time. Sinker, okay. I figured that was the last word. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're just going to revisit just a little bit. And I also thought that for the first rating, I could have done a little bit different voice for Phoenix, so I'm going to try a different voice for him this time. The voice I used was kind of high, a little childish. I think the character is a little bit childish, but his stature kind of makes it to where a higher pitched voice doesn't really work right. Forgot to turn on my fan. Starting to sweat. Okay, so here we go. Mr. Benton, have a good day. We will call you when and if we need to use any of the more intimate measures. Sinker.
Thank you, Mr. McGee. I apologize for being emotional. I've been run ragged by this whole thing.
He checked the time.
I should head out. A project of mine needs attention.
I can't remember how I did his voice, the client's voice, so I just tried that. Sorry. Suzette attempted another smile. Jeremy nodded to them and excused himself. Suzette's posture stiffened as Phoenix peeked around the corner of her desk and went to the blinds, ensuring the man was out of earshot.
The number 4. You gave that guy the number 4.
She placed a hand to her face, holding back a wicked smile. Suzette, stop calling it the number 4. So I greased him over a bit with some kindness and sympathy to our benefit. Sue me! He grinned at her, feeling proud of himself on this one. Suzette checked the time and motioned to the door.
Lucky is opening his cart. Go get some slaw dogs. Try to avoid guns this time, and actually bring me back some food, would you?
Fine, I deserve that. Be right back, Phoenix said as he stepped back outside. He breathed in the warm afternoon air of the canyon metropolis as he walked the busy streets. Being in the middle of the high-end merchant sector had its benefits when it came to a cheap meal. Nothing readied him for a busy workday like one of Lucky's apple onion slaw dogs. That sounds really good. It was 3 blocks before he ran into his favorite food cart, the whir of the metropolis buzzing around him all the while. Every town is known for something, and Rouge Mall, Nevada, the Bad Red, was a home for the outsider. It had been a few decades since laws about the public use of superpowers and matters supernatural were pushed through Congress. If you were lucky enough to have abilities or attributes beyond those of normal men, you had to carry your black card. The laws changed over the years. At first, they were restrictive, as understanding of the hows and whys of the supernatural Stygus? I think you corrected me on that pronunciation, I forget. Supernatural Stygus and the superpowered Omnis grew. Their rights had broadened, but for a few barely objectionable limits. These days, the concepts of the supernatural and superpowered were banal. It allowed for specialty shops and ad campaigns occasionally featured and more colorful citizens. Nope, what? It allowed for specialty shops and ad campaigns occasionally featuring... It allowed for specialty shops and ad campaigns occasionally featured the more colorful citizens. For anyone who stood outside the room, the laws on use of their abilities were just a part of daily life. This was not true for one man a few blocks away from getting his favorite food. Phoenix had his 15 minutes of fame, coincidentally, when he was 15. An ancient order known as the Cloister chose him to channel and manipulate the clockwork nature of the universe. At first, it sounded like the boasting of a teen seeking attention, but became a topic of closer study by the law. The court case had been kept local, but threats to take it to higher courts persisted. The problem with the State versus McGee case was an inability to classify him. Phoenix submitted himself to many tests, which yielded no results. As part of getting their black cards, potential Omnis and Stygus were scanned. Their auras indicated their classification. If anything, the average, normal citizen had a more brilliant aura than the red-haired boy, the crux of his defense. For all legal purposes, he was a normal human being. The restrictions on Omnis and Stygus did not and would never apply to him. However, neither could he enjoy their legal protections. Today, he needed lunch, which involved waving to his favorite street vendor and ordering a full bag of his famous slaw dogs. It was a tradition broken by a $20 bill thrust in front of him. Okay, I'm gonna assume I don't know who this guy is. Oh, even 6 feet. Alright, we don't know what his voice sounds like, so I'm going to assume.
I'll cover his bill.
Phoenix recognized the voice. He stared into the steel-gray eyes and ivory smile of Gregory Stevenson, lead investigator for Pyramidion Investigations. A few run-ins in the recent past had soured Phoenix to their offices. and especially Gregory. Christ on a crutch. What now? Oh, by the way, I forgot to tell you guys. So that was the end of chapter 1, sorry. I forgot to tell you guys. So what's really interesting about A.J. Mayall and this series, this is his first book. This is his first publication with Kindle, and for that I'm very impressed because it's such a, I mean, the text is so clean and the writing is so good, and if you look at his cover, it's really professional. But on talking to Adric last week for a while, just chatting with him for a while, it turns out he works for Smashwords, so he sees books go through the indie market every day, hundreds of books apparently. So he picked up a few things. It makes sense that he would have a better understanding of what's professional, what should be done. And it doesn't matter if it's his first release. It doesn't matter if it's anyone's first release. It should be professional. It should look good. And he understands that. So I'm really impressed with that. But what's even more impressive is he told me that he's got, I don't remember the exact number he gave me, but it was kind of absurd how many books in this series he's already outlined. If I'm not mistaken, he told me 20, which is huge. That's a huge number. That's a huge number of novels that he's got planned. I mean, that's like, I mean, if he paced himself, that's like 5-10 years of books that he could be making money on. More, he says more than 20. I'm just gonna say 20. But that's kind of crazy. And not only does he already have that many outlined, but he showed me, and I'm gonna go ahead and spoil some covers for you. He showed me that he's already got the covers worked on, and he's gone to a really cool, a really good artist. This is, I think, book 2, The Always Machine. And it's got like Krang it looks like a time machine or something. So that's pretty disgusting and awesome. And then my favorite, I don't know, this title is great. This Faithiest is maybe book 3. And this cover is really funny. I mean, I think it shows the lightheartedness of the actual series a little better than the first 2 books. So yeah, I just wanted to share that with you. He's got his shit in line. He's ready to go. So you guys should definitely, if you like what I'm reading here, you should definitely go pick up the first book in the series. It somehow doesn't have any reviews yet. Faithiest, yeah, it's great. Yep. Okay, so here's chapter 2. Hopefully, let's see how long it is. Okay, we'll see how much time it takes up. If at some point it's just too much and we need to move on, I'll just stop. I'll find a good place to stop. And if we don't get all the way through chapter 2, we'll let this one bleed over to one more episode of Sound Booth Theater Live. Chapter 2. Oh, nice. Yes, I love getting made-up pronunciations right. Chapter 2. Gregory Stevenson stood an even 6 feet in height, with shoulders so square you could put a level on them and his vertebrae could chat with the bubble. Phoenix had no idea what a cheap suit looked like, but he liked to think the gray 2-piece Gregory wore was. It was easy to hate a man in a cheap suit. "What the hell do you want, Stevenson?"
"I've been assigned to keep tabs on you, and frankly, I thought a professional courtesy was in order."
Gregory smiled, well practiced in making it look genuine. Phoenix, however, knew better. Professional courtesy, my ass. You're gloating. Phoenix lifted his hands in defeat. You have my attention. Who's putting eyes on me?
Francesca DeMarco. Seems you owe her a lot of money. Thought you were doing good for yourself, new kid.
Shut up, Stevenson, Phoenix hissed. Come to rub it in my face?
Not at all.
He grinned like a viper, eyes narrowing.
I came to give you an out.
Lucky looked between the two private investigators. Money was being offered to him, but his regular wasn't happy about it. Phoenix looked at the vendor and nodded. He may dislike Gregory, but a free lunch was a free lunch. He paused as Lucky bagged up his order, signaling him to keep adding more. I'm listening. Gregory realized too late he was being taken for every penny possible.
When we heard DeMarco was looking to track you, wanting to make sure you knew tabs were being put on you, we jumped at the chance. When we found out why, we insisted on taking the contract.
Enlighten me. I'm not staying consistent with this guy. Enlighten me. Nope. Wrong. Enlighten me. Why?
We could use talent like you.
Now I'm like trying to remember exactly how I pronounced it. Pyramidion only hires Omnis. I'm not Omnis, and you know it, so...
You have all that power at your disposal.
Phoenix glared at him. You've been getting calls about your hiring practices, and you want to bring on a normal to show you're on the up and up. Who cares if that normal happens to be able to fly and lift buildings? Gregory's smile widened.
I knew you'd understand. Wouldn't it benefit you to share your talents instead of locking yourself away? Barely making ends meet?
I like where I am, thank you, Phoenix muttered under his breath, taking the bag of slaw dogs from Lucky.
We'll pay off all your debt. You can keep your little home, have steady income, and call on us for backup if you need it. Where's the downside?
I wouldn't be my own boss. I'd be hired for my powers and not my talents. Oh, not to mention, Pyramidion tried this before, and fuck you sideways.
McGee, come on. We can help you.
Stevenson produced a card and handed it over to Phoenix, the familiar triangular logo of The familiar triangular logo of Pyramidion in white. The familiar triangular logo of Pyramidion in white over their phone number atop the black card. Phoenix pocketed it. Closing shop and working for the big name in town was the last resort. If business continued its current downward trend, he might be forced to jump ship and save his home, or he'd default and be homeless and out of work, which meant he'd go to Pyramidion, tail between his legs. I'll consider it, McGee muttered. Thanks for the grub, Stevenson. I gotta ask, if everyone at your place is Omnis, what's your trick?
You're a detective? You tell me. You're a detective? You tell me.
Phoenix grumbled and stormed back to his office. Gregory leaned on the brick wall and gave him an exaggerated wave.
I look forward to your call.
Phoenix burst through the front door to McGee Investigations, nearly throwing the bag in fury. Change of plans, Suzette. Bump Benton to the top of the pile. Also, I have a few things I want to say to your grandmother, if you wouldn't mind being the messenger. Suzette clicked her tongue and tensed her jaw, looking up at the red-haired beanpole of a man. Oh, great. What now? You know how Benton almost went to Pyramidion? What about him? Guess who hired them to tell me because I'm a little late with payment? He slammed a fist on the door jamb leading to his loft. She didn't, Suzette said, frustration rising. I'm sorry. You know how she gets. Phoenix calmed himself, moving behind Suzette. It's fine. I'll eat crackers and drink water until I pay her back every damn penny if that's what it takes. How'd you find out about Pyramidion? That asshole Stevenson was at Lucky's cart. Told me she wants me to know I'm being watched. He sat, rummaging through the haphazard pile of papers Suzette tried in vain to keep organized for him. 1 second. I gotta see what's on my docket. If I gotta scrounge for lost cats, I will. He had a handful of insurance cases. It kept food on the table and paychecks coming to Suzette. The local insurance companies found his methods a bit reckless, but his reputation and outstanding track record kept him at the top of their lists. Undercutting Pyramidion by 30% didn't hurt. Undercutting Pyramidion by 30% didn't hurt. He nearly lost himself to his lunch routine of checking email and bank statements. Keeping a proper schedule would be tight, but the insurance cases were easy. He liked it when people were honest. It meant less work and more time for interesting cases. Interesting, meaning lucrative. He grabbed his cell phone, tapping in Benton's number, certain Jeremy would be at work by now. After a few rings, the milquetoast voice answered. "Mr. Benton, this is Phoenix McGee. Sorry to call so soon, but I have an opening for you today. Do you have the house to yourself for an hour? We can install those cameras and data collecting devices." Speaking in hushed tones, Jeremy informed McGee he would take an extended lunch and meet him at his residence. "Most of this stuff is easy to set up. Just make sure we aren't interrupted. I'd hate to be made before this whole thing starts. I need to check on a couple other clients, then I'll be over. Give me 2 hours to get there?"
That sounds fine. My wife's the head of security here and is currently consulting with some of the local police on a recent event with some of the staff.
Nothing too serious, I hope?
Not that I know of. Our NDAs are tight. Some of what we do, we can't discuss with each other. Part of the buyout, you see. Heightened security measures all around.
All right. I'll see you in 2 hours. Phoenix ended the call. And his lunch. He looked to Suzette, who chugged coffee and did case research. "Suzette, can you work up a file on Margaret Benton?" A grunt was her response as he heard furious typing and clicking, tapping screens. Research mode activated. I should have the basics up by the time you're ready to leave. 5 minutes, I assume?" she muttered, her eyes darting across a half-dozen dossiers. "Yep. Take my flip-top and swipe it over. I still have 2 insurance cases before meeting with Benton. Swipe the address over to me, too. I'll need the whole shebang for monitoring, plus a fog drive."
"That's quite a bit for a cheating wife."
15% extra. He checked off everything. Gonna give him what he paid for. He passed the flip-top to Suzette, who sat it down, spun in her chair, and continued the momentum to fist-bump him as he went to his loft.
"Go get ready, McGee."
Phoenix bounded up the steps 2 at a time, opening the door to his loft, where he kept his essentials. These consisted of his beige trench coat and his necklace, a large silvery gear on a loop of leather, with a clasp on the back. If not for the chaos of the morning, he'd already be wearing them. He peeled off his shirt, revealing his toned chest. A few scars littered his body. He tossed the shirt onto his large bed, just to the left of a plush raccoon. The stuffed animal drooped to the side, which Phoenix rushed over to straighten up. Bouncer was, by far, his most cherished possession. "Sorry, buddy," the man said with a smile. He gave the toy a wave as he got ready. A dress shirt replaced the T-shirt as he plotted out the rest of the day in advance. Fly to the east end of town, monitor Mr. De Vega. A recent work accident left him on crutches. The doctors recommended he use a chair, but De Vega refused. Any signs of better mobility than that meant a quick snap of the camera and a report to the insurance company. Afterwards, verify the neck injury of Mrs. Wilson on the north end of town. That should take 45 minutes. Head to the Bentons, set up the handy-eye cameras, plug in hub kits into any computer he has access to. Finally, call Suzette to verify the network and come home for a night of watching TV and the monitor on standby. With the monitor on standby. He snagged his necklace off his bedside table and looked around for his jeans. He asked the stuffed animal, "You see my pants, buddy?" The raccoon lay still. a smile on his face, as always. Suzette had once said if Sherlock Holmes talked to a skull, it was fitting that a person of McGee's caliber of deduction would have a comparable talking buddy. It was the one time she had ever made a negative comment about the stuffed animal. McGee had been ready to sack her over the comment. You could insult his style, immaturity, naivety, ego, need to play the hero, or habits, but you did not insult the raccoon. McGee found the pants under his bed, slid them on, and tucked away his phone, wallet, and keys. He grabbed his jacket off the hook near the door and put it on as he spun before his full-length mirror. He finished by dusting off his lapels and checking his short, spiky red hair. "Let's do this," he said as he opened the door. He extended his senses to the local area. Everything he requested was set out and passed inspection. He held his arms out and pressed his palms down, lifting off the floor a few inches. Phoenix thrust his right hand out, and the various devices lifted and fit themselves into the messenger bag, which, in turn, shut. Phoenix rocketed toward the open door and waved to Suzette as he grabbed the bag. She looked up from her book, a dry smile on her face. He was gone a second before hovering backwards, peeking his head around the corner. "You want to stay late and watch the monitors?" She shook her head.
"No, thanks. After dinner, I'll probably stay in a spare room at the hotel."
She didn't even look up to acknowledge him.
"I'll lock up and I'll keep the fog drive active. If you absolutely need me, call."
"Okay. Have a good night when you close shop." He paused. "So, what you reading?" "I just finished that new fantasy novel, Seymour of the World. It's pretty good. I recommend it." Immediately, he winced, knowing his recommendation would ensure she'd never indulge in it. She lifted the cover. It was white, with stark, thin black letters. A coffee cup ring stained its upper right-hand corner. The author had so many letters after his name, Phoenix wondered if he lived at college or mugged a Scrabble bag. "The Art of Madness?" He blinked. "What's that about?" She sighed and closed the book.
"Phoenix, some of us enjoy reading about things other than whatever is currently popular at the time. This," she said, motioning to the book, "is a dissertation on the cultural effect of altered mental states throughout the years. It discusses actual medical disorders and how religious fervor and tribalism have influenced societal progress, for better and worse. It has various essays and studies on the history of psychology and its effects on the collective whole."
He blinked, staring vacantly.
"It's a book for smart people who read books by doctors and not because they have to for class."
She paused, her smile going wide. Leaning in, she tucked a lock of hair behind her ear and whispered,
"You should leave before I call you stupid."
He scowled and took off into the sky. After a few minutes, he soared above the skyline, hands outstretched at the hips, his trench coat billowing behind him. He rocketed toward the east side of town for the De Vega case. As he expected, sometimes injured people are honestly injured. Sometimes there is no grand conspiracy or lie. Sometimes people are honestly honest. It was a feeling Phoenix tried to carry with him on every such investigation. He was halfway toward the Wilson residence when his phone rang. He stopped in midair, reached into his pocket, and pulled out his Scarface, the preferred earbud for flyers. He hooked it over his ear, popped in the bud, and drew down the adhesive strip to the corner of his mouth. "In midair! Talk to me!" He squinted into the distance, trying to remember what landmarks he used last time he checked in on Mrs. Wilson.
"It's me, McGee," Suzanne muttered over the line. "I'm closing shop in an hour. I have everything filed in hard copy in the inbox by your bedroom door. I also have them on your personal fog drive in today's folder. If you need me, you have my number. If my phone is off, call Grandma Francesca. I'm only saying this because I have a hunch on this one. If those cameras catch what Mr. Benton suggests, I kind of want to see this."
Phoenix could hear the dark curiosity dripping from her voice over the phone. "An hour? It's the middle of the day. I'm not paying you to ignore the desk," he muttered, knowing he was about to get an earful.
"Phoenix, Benton's case was a fluke, and insurance cases won't come in for another week. The only remaining cases open are 2 obvious non-frauds and what I expect to be the best show we've seen in months. Seriously, listen to my hunch. Besides, I want to beat traffic if I'm going to see my grandma. Not all of us can fly, you know.
What's giving you this hunch, Suzette? He scanned the horizon for the cluster of streets he used as a waypoint his last visit. Finding it, he flew rapidly to the next destination on his agenda. He heard an incessant tap-tap-tapping on the other end of the call, followed by a squeal like rubbing a pane of glass with your finger.
Well, I did a bit more research into our dear Mrs. Benton.
Phoenix grinned, waiting to hear what dirty secrets Suzette dug up.
She's mostly clean, but worked in the RMPD before moving to private security optimization. She has some write-ups involving fraternizing with fellow officers, a few more involving cover-ups for some of those officers she had made bonds with. She took an early retirement to avoid the internal affairs investigation into her. Internal affairs.
You suspect she's been continuing these trysts during her whole time with her husband? He navigated the skyline, moving to the outskirts of the industrial complex, dropping to the rooftops.
Suspect? Are you kidding me, McGee? I haven't even started yet. You know I said bonds, right? Get this. Everyone she was suspected of being close with and helped out of jams, they're all lycanthropes.
She read with the sort of glee reserved for sociopaths or children finding a candy stash. Phoenix filled in the details. They're known for their loyalty and pack mentality. She helped them out. They consider her one of them on a psychological level. I know the police department has a Stygus contingent. Werewolves are regarded highly for their heightened senses and durability on the streets, and risking life and limb for each other. But the idea of one of them risking themselves or their career to carry out an affair on an old coworker? He dropped a bit lower, grabbing his camera and plugged it into his flip-top. Since you're still there, swipe my flip-top access to the fog, would you? Just checking on Mrs. Wilson before meeting with Benton. I'm going to need you to help me monitor the setup anyways. No leaving early until we are certain the network is up and running and backed up into the fog.
Fine. 1 moment. Also 5, she said curtly, her response bitter and cold to him, like he had missed some easy-to-spot answer and she was a disappointed teacher.
What do you mean 5? 5 what?
He peered through the camera and found Mrs. Wilson sipping sun tea in a garden swing on her patio. Her husband and a grown daughter sat nearby playing cards. She wore the neck brace with a scarf around it. Honestly honest. Werewolves. The idea of one risking it all is stupid, yeah, but 5 of them and you have a pack making visits to one of their own. Silence filled the next few moments as Phoenix watched high above, before Suzette yelled at him, snapping him out of his daze. Sorry, Suzette. Yeah, okay. 5. Let me handle this. I'll call you when I meet with Benton, and no leaving early without my say-so, traffic or not. Fine. Talk to you later. Jerk. If this pans out, I'll let you keep a copy of the tape. Hope for you yet. Talk to you soon, McGee. He tapped the earbud twice, causing the microphone and wire and roll back up against it. He sat in the treetop, watching the family. He wished his family was like that. Normal. Before he had become what he was today. The Gear Witch. He thought the name was stupid, and hoped to convince those in the cloister to let him change it. Name aside, he couldn't tell anyone how he had become the Gear Witch. He witnessed his predecessors battle on his apartment rooftop while trying to sneak a cigarette. He could never explain how looking into the complexity of time and reality left a mark on him. It had taken some of him, dulled his senses to the world, made everything bland. It had taken some of him, dulled his senses to the world, made everything bland. The upside and downside of being the chosen was the knowledge that after death you went to the cloister to teach those who came after you, being denied any other potential afterlife. Being a timeless singularity, he knew he was sitting there somewhere in the cloister right now, sipping tea or coffee and giving his perspective to his successors somewhere down the rivers of time. Damn the others, a constant reminder of what was awaiting him. It was an assault on his free will. It was the worst part of the power. Not that it hadn't helped on several occasions. He'd seen ghosts, and he was certain some manner of afterlife existed apart from his guaranteed eternal retirement. He was mentally prepared to deal with oblivion, but that things would wind down and end, but he knew better than that for himself. That's not the path of the Gear Witch. No, for him there was an eternity in the machine, cut off from friends, even if they had to succumb to a void of non-being. He didn't have the choice to jump in and disappear with them. He had to continue. His name would be stripped from him, then given a name close to his identity, but never who he was for fear of someone doing a bit of looking in on him. He thought of the others as fools, as old fools, relics of a time that had evolved past them. To know where his eternity lay was a sort of torture you don't come across every day. The worst of the worst part was the blessing. A blessing, they called it, to have your entire history rewritten upon your death, so the secret of the Gear Witch was kept safe and hidden. A handful of close colleagues who wouldn't be remembered in a few generations could recall their tales, of course. In the end, they would become faded memories of a history left to rot. This is what Phoenix McGee thought of when he saw families like the Wilsons enjoying a pleasant afternoon on the patio. He saw a fleeting perfect moment not only stolen forever from him, but dangled before him like a burning picture of a loved one, just out of reach. He longed for it. Even if he managed to grip it and hold it close, it would be damaged beyond repair. He dialed the insurance company again, telling them curtly that everything with the Wilson account was checking out as it should be. In a moment, he was gone, soaring into the air to make the thoughts go away. It was an easy enough task. He dealt with the idea of his mortality at least once a day when he was alone. Alone. Except for Bouncer, that is. All right. So that's it for The Art of Madness. Thanks so much, Adric Mayall, AJ Mayall, for requesting it from me. I think if Chapter 3 is short enough, I can do that. Yes, Chapter 3 is really short. So I'm going to do one more chapter for the next SBTL, or perhaps the one after. We'll see. I'll let you know. But, yeah, I'm having fun with this book. So thanks again for the request. Hope you guys enjoyed it. And on to the next book. Now, it is time for the classics. This is a new segment that I'm doing for all of my SBTLs in the future, unless people turn out to hate it or whatever. But we'll try it out for now. And what I'm doing for this segment is basically just finding classic literature. Now, some people have already, like when I made a post about it, I made a post asking people, what do you think? You think this is a good idea? And then immediately people were like requesting everything. The Tempest! Fucking, I don't remember what all the requests were, but it turns out people were interested already. So, what I've done is decided that for this first one, I'm going to read something that I'm actually reading myself right now. It was actually a suggestion that I got from Jordan Peterson. I don't know if you've heard of that guy. He's a professor up in Canada. I always forget what the actual college is that he's from, but he's brilliant. He's an amazing lecturer. He's a psychology professor, but he talks a lot. Well, basically, he's talking more about. He's talking against the postmodern type of mentality that a lot of young people are being indoctrinated with in the universities. It's really dangerous ideology for people who don't have any experience with the world and don't have any real understanding about how the world works. And Dostoevksy, the guy who wrote Crime and Punishment, which is a book that Jordan Peterson recommended to everybody as soon as
well, not as soon. What am I saying? It was during one of his lectures. He's actually got entire classes of his lectures on YouTube, on his YouTube channel, and they're fascinating. This one was about identity and politics, and in this particular lecture, he recommended people read Crime and Punishment by Fyodor Dostoevsky. And like I said before, I've already read one book by Dostoevsky, which I really liked, but I didn't quite understand. It's called Notes from the Underground, and it's about this guy who's like really isolated himself, and he's kind of fucked up in the head. And I don't know, I'd have to read it again to really comprehend what he was trying to say with it. But it was well written and interesting. Well, I mean, it's translated from Russian, right? And a lot of what Dostoevsky's experiences have been experiences with socialism and communism in Russia, and what happens in those societies, and how it comes about, and exactly the philosophies and tactics used by proponents of that ideology. So I decided to pick up Crime and Punishment, and I've only made it through the first 2 chapters, but chapter 2 is already like gut-wrenching, and it's got this great monologue, and so I want to use this one not only to kind of I feel like it really sets up the rest of the book extremely well. I think that this particular monologue is kind of about the dangers of collectivism when it comes to people's flaws of character, and how those flaws get amplified, and how really it's the opposite of effect. You know, a lot of people think socialism is for like, oh, well, it's to make sure that there's a big social safety net, and, you know, make sure we can all succeed, and that if you fall on hard times, it's okay, the state's there to catch you. And that's really not what happens. And I think this particular monologue that this one character has, it's really powerful, and it demonstrates it very well. So, first of all, let's look at the cover, Crime and Punishment. First of all, this is the cover of the version that I purchased from Kindle. This is the Penguin Classics, and actually the translation it's a separate translation from the one that people are used to. It feels a little. I looked at both translations, and I felt like this one had the best flow, and it felt the most natural. The cover's interesting. You kind of see what it's all about, right? I mean, it's very well done, and illustrates the concept of the book. I also like this one a whole lot. This is a great cover. It's not the cover of the one that I got, but it definitely reminds me of, you know, classic literature, and it's just a really horrifying image. But I think my favorite, because I was searching through a bunch of different covers that I could have used. This is my favorite one, I think, for sure. I mean, I don't know. It left me speechless. I was like, yes, perfection. Crime and Punishment. Yeah, it's just, the problem with it is, at least for the show, it's way too funny. Oh yeah, it does it reminds me of that too. But it's way too funny for the tone of this piece. So I'm gonna switch it back to the other one. I just thought the RoboCop one is just perfect. So brilliant. Okay. So, real quick, the main character of this book, his name's Raskolnikov. And through the first chapter, we kind of meet the guy, and he walks through the street in the clothes that he's ashamed of because everyone's fucking poor, so he's poor, and he's wearing this silly top hat, as you saw in, actually, you see in the first cover. He's wearing a top hat, and it's actually even like supposed to be all messed up. Anyway, so he's in the first chapter. He goes to meet with basically this old lady who pawns things for people, and he even debates robbing her in his own head, and like that messed with his head. You know, the fact that those things were going, that he was even having those thoughts because he hasn't eaten in 2 days. And right after that, he goes out into the street and he's kind of dazed, like, what's wrong with me? And then he goes to a bar. He never goes to bars, but he goes to one this time, and then he drinks some beer. And that's the end of chapter 1. This is chapter 2, and someone comes into the store. 2. Raskolnikov was unused to crowds, and, as has already been said, he shunned society, recently more than ever. But now, for some reason, he suddenly felt drawn to other people. Excuse me. Something new seemed to be stirring inside him, bringing with it a thirst for human company. A whole month of intense anguish and dismal excitement had left him so excited. A whole month of intense anguish and dismal excitement had left him so exhausted that he yearned for at least a moment's rest in another world. Any world would do. And now he was only too happy to remain in the den, filthy though it was. The landlord was upstairs somewhere, but he often came down some steps into the bar, and the first that could be seen of him were his foppish blacked boots with their big red tops. He wore a long coat and a badly soiled black satin waistcoat, with no tie, and his whole face looked as if it had been smeared with grease, like an iron lock. A boy of about 14 stood behind the counter, and another, younger kid was on hand if anyone needed serving. There were chopped-up cucumbers, black rusks, and fish cut in little pieces. The smell was awful. It was very stuffy. Just sitting there soon became unbearable, and everything was so steeped in alcohol fumes that the air alone, it seemed, could make you drunk in 5 minutes. It happens sometimes that we meet people, even perfect strangers, who interest us at first glance, quite suddenly and unexpectedly, before a word has been spoken. Just such an impression was made on Raskolnikov by the customer who sat off to the side and resembled a retired civil servant. Later, the young man would recall this first impression several times and even explain it to himself as a premonition. He couldn't stop looking over at him. Partly, of course, because the latter kept staring at him and was clearly desperate to strike up a conversation. As for the others in the den, including the landlord, the civil servant looked at them in a familiar way and even bored sort of way, though not without a hint of lofty disdain, as if they were a people of lesser status and education to whom he could have nothing to say. He was already in his 50s, of average height and stocky build, graying and balding, with a yellow, almost greenish face swollen by constant drinking, and with puffy eyelids hiding a pair of reddish eyes that were as tiny as slits, yet beamed with life. Even so, there was something very odd about him. A kind of rapture shone from his eyes, and perhaps even intelligence. Yet madness, too, seemed to flicker there. He was dressed in an old, utterly ragged black tailcoat which had shed its buttons. Only one was still clinging on, and, clearly eager to keep up appearances, he made sure to use it. A shirt front, all crumpled, stained, and splattered, stuck out from beneath a nankeen waistcoat. I don't know what that word means. Nankeen. A kind of pale yellowish cloth, originally made at Nanxing china from a yellow variety of cotton, but subsequently manufactured from ordinary cotton that is then dyed. Also in the plural, a piece or variety of his cloth. Okay. His face had been shaved, civil servant style, but not for some time, and a thick, bluish-gray stubble was poking through. There was something of the respectable state official about his mannerisms, too. But he was uneasy, kept ruffling his hair, and occasionally, in anguish, propped his head in his hands, resting his tattered elbows on the bespattered, sticky table. Eventually, he looked straight at Raskolnikov and said loudly and firmly,
"My good sir, may I make so bold as to engage you in polite conversation? For though you may be of different appearance..."
Fuck, man, my Russian is not that great. Hold on.
"My good sir, may I make so bold as to engage you in polite conversation? For though you may be of indifferent appearance, my experience detects in you a man of education and one unaccustomed to drink. I myself have always respected learning when combined with heartfelt sentiment. Moreover, I hold the rank of titular consular." "Marmeladov's the name. Titular consular. Dare I ask whether you have been in the service?"
"No, I'm studying," replied the young man, somewhat surprised both by the speaker's distinctive flowery tone and at being addressed so directly and so bluntly. Despite his recent pang of desire for human company of any kind, the very first word addressed to him in reality instantly elicited his usual unpleasant and irritable feeling of disgust towards any stranger who came into contact with him, or showed the slightest wish to do so.
"I knew it! A student, or a former student. The civil servant cried. "Experience, my good sir. Long years of experience."
He put a finger to his forehead as if to congratulate himself.
"Either you were once a student, or you are still walking that road. Permit me."
He rose, swayed, grabbed his pot and little glass, moved over to the young man, and sat down next to him at a slight angle. Though drunk, he spoke with a vigorous eloquence, only occasionally tripping over his words and drawling. He threw himself on Raskolnikov almost hungrily, as if he, too, hadn't spoken to anyone for an entire month.
"My good sir," he began almost solemnly, "poverty is no sin. That much is true. And drunkenness is no virtue. That's even truer. But beggary, sir. Yes, beggary. Now that is a sin. In poverty, you still retain the nobility of your innate feelings. In beggary, nobody retains it. Ever. Beggars are not driven from the fold of humanity with a stick. No, they are swept out with a broom to make the insult all the greater, and rightly so, for in beggary I am the first to insult myself. Hence the public house. My good sir, a month ago, Mr. Lebezyatnikov gave my spouse a thrashing, and my spouse is nothing like me. Do you follow, sir? Permit me further to inquire, if for no better reason than mere curiosity. Have you ever had occasion to pass the night on the Neva, on the hay barges?"
"No, I haven't," replied Raskolnikov. "How do you mean?"
"Well, sir, that's where I've been, for the 5th night running."
He refilled his glass and drank, lost in thought. Wisps of hay did indeed cling to his clothes here and there was even some in his hair. It was more than likely that 5 days had passed since he'd last changed his clothes or washed. His hands, in particular, were filthy, greasy and red, the nails black. His conversation appeared to arouse a general, if idle, interest. The boys behind the bar began to titter. The landlord, it seemed, had come down specially from the room upstairs so as to listen to this entertainer, and he sat at a distance, yawning lazily and self-importantly. Marmeladov was clearly an old face here. Marmeladov was clearly an old face here, and his penchant for flowery speech must have derived from his habit of talking to strangers in bars. For some drinkers this habit becomes a need, especially if at home they are ordered about and harshly treated. That's why, in the company of other drinkers, they always go to such lengths to be vindicated and, if possible, earn their respect.
"A right entertainer," the landlord boomed. "Why is you not working then? Why, pray, do you not serve, civil servant?" "Why do I not serve, my dear sir?"
echoed Marmeladov, addressing himself exclusively to Raskolnikov, as though it were he who had posed the question.
"Why do I not serve? Why does my heart not ache to know that I bow and scrape in vain? A month ago, when Mr. Lebeziatnikov thrashed my spouse with his own bare hands, while I lay tipsy, did I not suffer? Pray tell me, young man, have you ever had occasion to, beg for a loan, say, without hope?"
I have. But what do you mean, without hope?
"I mean, without any hope at all, sir, knowing in advance that nothing will come of it. For example, you know in advance, and with complete certainty, that this man, this most well-intentioned and most helpful citizen, will not give you a kopeck for, I ask you, why should he? After all, he knows full well that I shan't return it. Out of compassion? But Mr. Lebeziatnikov, who keeps abreast of the latest thinking, was explaining only the other day that in our age even science has prohibited compassion, and that is how they already do things in England, where political economy is all the rage. So, I ask you, why should he? And yet, knowing in advance that he will not give it to you, you set out all the same, and—
"So why go?"
Raskolnikov put in.
"What if there is nowhere else to go, and no one else to go to? After all, every man must have at least somewhere he can go. There are times when one simply has to go somewhere, anywhere. When my only begotten daughter went off to work for the first time on a yellow ticket."
A yellow ticket is something that the government gave to prostitutes to make sure that they stayed healthy. It was basically something that they had to bring back to the government once in a while to get checkups and stuff.
"I too went off, for my daughter lives on a yellow ticket, sir." He added in parentheses, looking at the young man with a certain unease. "Never mind. Good sir, never mind."
He hurriedly continued with apparent equanimity when the two boys behind the bar snorted and the landlord grinned.
"Never mind, sir. The mere wagging of heads cannot embarrass me, for now everything is known to all, and all that was hidden is made manifest, and I respond not with contempt, but with humility. So be it. So be it. Behold the man. Pray tell me, young man, can you— No, let's put it more strongly, more vividly. Not can you, but dare you, gazing at me here and now, state for a fact that I am not a pig?"
The young man said nothing.
"Well, sir,"
the orator continued, pausing with an imposing and even, on this occasion, exaggeratedly dignified air for the latest round of sniggering to abate.
"Well, sir, I may be a pig, but she is a lady. I may bear the likeness of a beast, but Katerina Ivanovna, my spouse, is an educated person who was born to a field officer."
Sometimes that scraping is just a little too harsh for me. I need to work on that.
"I may be a scoundrel, but she is endowed with a sublime heart and feelings ennobled by good breeding. And yet, oh, would that my lady had pity on me. After all, kindest sir, every man must have at least one place where even he might be pitied. Katerina Ivanovna is high-minded but unjust. And though I understand myself that even when she seizes me by my forelocks, she does so purely from the pity of her heart. For I am not embarrassed to repeat, young man, that she seizes me by my forelocks. He reaffirmed with redoubled dignity, after hearing sniggers once more. But heavens, if she could only once, just once. But no, all this is vanity, a waste of breath and nothing more. For my desire has come to pass more than once, and I have been pitied more than once, but that's just how I am. A born brute.
Not half, observed the landlord with a yawn. Marmeladov banged his fist on the table.
Yes, it's the mark of my character. Are you aware, good sir, that I even drank away her stockings? Are you aware of that fact? Not her boots, sir, for at least that would have borne some resemblance to the order of things, but her stockings. Yes, sir, her stockings. Her little mohair shawl. I drank that away too. A gift from before. Her very own, not mine. And we live in a chilly little corner. And she caught cold this winter, and now she's coughing up blood. Not to mention our 3 little mites. Katerina Ivanovna's hard at it from dusk till dawn. Scrubbing and cleaning and washing the children, for cleanliness has been a habit of hers since infancy, and she is weak of chest and prone to consumption, and I can feel it. Do I not feel? The more I drink, the more I feel. That is why I do it. Imbibing, I seek compassion and feeling. It is not merriment I seek, but sorrow. Only sorrow. I drink that I may suffer more deeply.
With that, he lowered his head onto the table, as if in despair.
Young man, he continued, raising himself once more, I read, as it were, a certain sorrow in your features. I read it there the moment you walked in, which is why I was so quick to address you. For it is not to disgrace myself before these gentlemen of leisure, who already know it all anyway, that I relate the story of my life to you. Rather, I seek a man of feeling and education. You should know that my spouse attended an aristocratic school for daughters of the nobility, and at the leaving ball she danced the pas de châle.
I don't know what that means. Come on. A historian of dress, the pants with the shawl became popular in Russian schools for young ladies at the beginning of the 19th century, coinciding with the fashion for Persian shawls. Okay.
And at the leaving ball she danced the pas de châle in the presence of the governor and other persons, for which she received a gold medal and a certificate of distinction. The medal was sold, long ago now. But the certificate of distinction is still in her trunk, and just recently she showed it to our landlady. And though she and the landlady are in perpetual discord, the urge to show off a little before someone, anyone, and reminisce about better, happier days was too strong to resist. And I do not judge her. No, I do not. For this is what has remained in her memory, when all else has turned to dust. Yes, a proud lady, proud and unbending. She scrubs the floor herself and gets by on black bread, but she will not be slighted. That is why she could not let Mr. Lebeziatnikov's rudeness pass unchallenged, and when Mr. Lebeziatnikov gave her a beating for it, she took to her bed less from injury to her body than from injury to her feelings. I married her when she was already a widow, with 3 children, 3 tiny little mites. She married her first husband, an infantry officer, for love, and ran away with him from her father's home. She loved him beyond measure, but he started gambling, ended up in court, and promptly died. He beat her towards the end, and though she stood up to him, which I know for a fact, with papers to prove it. She remembers him to this day, with tears in her eyes, and reproaches me with his example. And I am glad for her, for in her imagination at least she once was happy. So she was left with 3 infants in a far-flung, savage district, which I also happened to find myself, and she was left in such hopeless beggary that I, for all that I have seen in my life, am quite incapable of even describing it. Her relations turned their backs on her, and she was proud, too proud. So then, my good sir, I also widowed, with a 14-year-old daughter from my first wife, offered my hand in marriage, for I could not bear to look on such suffering. You may judge the depth of her plight from the fact that she, educated, well brought up, the bearer of a famous surname, consented to marry me. She did, crying and sobbing and wringing her hands, but marry me she did, for she had nowhere else to go. Do you understand, my good sir? Do you really understand what that means, to have nowhere left to go? No, this you have not yet to understand. For an entire year I carried out my duty in godly, pious fashion, and not a drop did I touch. He jabbed at his pint measure of vodka. For I am a man of feeling. Yet even thus I could not please. Then I lost my position, also through no fault of my own, a change of personnel, and then I began to partake. A year and a half must have passed now since we have finally found ourselves, after lengthy wanderings and numerous calamities, in this magnificent capital city graced by numerous monuments. And here I received a position. Received it and lost it again. Understand, sir? This time it was my own fault. The mark of my character came to the fore. So now we occupy a little corner of a house, and Amalia Fyodorovna Lipoweschel is our landlady, and how we get by and how we pay I do not know. Many others live there too, of course. Sodom, sir, of the foulest kind. Yes. Meanwhile, my girl from my first marriage has grown up, and the things she has had to endure from her stepmother along the way, well, the less said the better. For although Katerina Ivanovna's soul overflows with the noblest sentiments, she is fiery and irritable, and quick to slap you down. Yes, sir. But what is the use in remembering? Sonia, as you can well imagine, received no education. I did try, some 4 years ago, to give her a grounding in geography and world history, but because my own grasp of these fields is uncertain, and due to a lack of decent primers, for what books there were. Well, they are no longer even around, those books. That was all the teaching she had. Cyrus the Great was as far as we got. Later, on reaching maturity, she read several books of a romantic bent, and just recently, through the good offices of Mr. Lebezyatnikov, she read with great interest a certain little tome, Luz's Physiology. Perhaps you know it? And even conveyed parts of it to us aloud. And that is the sum of her education. Now let me turn to you, my good sir, with a private question of my own. In your view, can a poor but honest girl earn much through honest labor? She'll not earn 15 kopecks a day, sir, if she is honest and has no particular talents, and even then, only if she works herself into the ground. And even then, Councillor Ivan Ivanovich Klopstock, are you familiar with the name? Not only failed to pay her for sewing 6 Holland cloth shirts, he even insulted her and showed her the door, stamping his feet and calling her all sorts of names, claiming that the collar she'd sewn was the wrong size and not straight, not to mention the little mites going hungry. And Katerina Ivanovna, wringing her hands and pacing the room, her cheeks coming out in red blotches, as is always the way with this ailment. "You're sponging, girl, eating and drinking and keeping yourself warm. But search me how you can drink and eat when even the little ones don't see a crust of bread for 3 days at a time." I had my feet up at the time. Well, all right. I was tipsy, sir, and I could hear my Sonia, as tame as they come, with that meek little voice of hers, and her fair hair and her little face, always so pale and thin. I could hear her saying, "Well then, Katerina Ivanovna, do I really have to do that?" Meanwhile, Darya Frantsevna, a malicious woman well known to the police, had already made a few inquiries through the landlady. "Well then," mocked Katerina Ivanovna, "what are you saving exactly? Precious jewels?" But blame her not, my good sir. Blame her not. This was said not in soundness of mind, but in a tumult of feeling, in sickness and to the crying of unfed children, and it was said more to offend than for its precise meaning. For such is Katerina Ivanovna's character, and the moment the children start crying, albeit from hunger, she immediately beats them. Come 6 o'clock, I saw Sonechka get to her feet, cover her head, put on her little burnous, and leave the apartment. And by 9 she was back again. She went straight to Katerina Ivanovna and laid out 30 roubles on the table without saying a word. Not a word, not even a glance. She just took our big, green drap-de-dame shawl, we have one between us made of drap-de-dame, buried her head and face in it, and lay down on the bed, her face to the wall, her little shoulders and body a-quivering. As for me, sir, I was in the same state as before, with my feet up. And that, young man, was when I saw Katerina Ivanovna walk over to Sonechka's little bed, also without saying a word, and kneel at the foot of the bed for the rest of the evening, kissing Sonechka's feet, not wanting to get up, and in the end, they both fell asleep just like that, in each other's arms. Both of them. Both. Yes, sir. And as for me, I was tipsy and had my feet up.
Marmeladov fell silent. His voice just seemed to break off. Then, with sudden haste, he poured out a glass, drank it, and cleared his throat.
"And ever since then, good sir," he went on after a pause, "in consequence of a certain unfavorable circumstance and certain malicious reports, in which activity Darya Frantsevna proved especially zealous, alleging that she had not shown due respect, ever since then my daughter, Sofia Semyonovna, has been obliged to take the yellow ticket, on account of which she could remain with us no longer. For our landlady, Amalia Fyodorovna, would not allow it, though she had previously assisted Darya Frantsevna, and Mr. Lebeziatnatov himself. Well, it was on account of Sonia that he had that rumpus with Katerina Ivanovna. First he tried his luck with Sonechka, then he suddenly got up on his high horse. Am I, a man of considerable education, to live under one roof with the likes of her? Well, Katerina Ivanovna didn't let that pass. She stepped in. And that was that. Sonechka usually comes by at dusk now, helps out Katerina Ivanovna and brings us what she can. She lives at Kapernaumov's, the tailor's, rents a room there, and Kapernaumov is lame and tongue-tied, and his entire numerous brood is also tongue-tied, and his wife, she too is tongue-tied. They squeeze into a single room, while Sonia has one of her own, with a partition. Yes. The poorest of people and tied of tongue. Yes, indeed. So I got up bright and early, and put on my rags, raised my hands to heaven, and set off to see His Excellency Ivan Afanasyevich, Perhaps you know His Excellency Ivan Afanas... Fuck me. Perhaps you know His Excellency Ivan Afanasyevich? No? Then you do not know a godly man. He is wax. Wax before the face of the Lord. As wax melteth. He was even moved to tears after deigning to hear me out. Well, Marmeladov, he says, you've already disappointed me once. Now I'm giving you a second chance as my personal responsibility. Those were his very words. So remember that, and be off with you. I kissed the dust at his feet. In my mind, of course, for in reality he would not have allowed it, being a dignitary and a man of the latest thinking in matters of state and education. And when I returned home and announced that I had been taken back into the service and was drawing a salary, well, good heavens, you should have seen what happened then.
Marmeladov broke off once again in the greatest excitement. At that moment, an entire platoon of drunkards, who were already far gone, came in off the street, and the sounds of a rented barrel organ and a cracked 7-year-old voice singing "Little Farm" carried over from the entrance. It grew noisy. The landlord and the serving boys busied themselves with the new group. Paying the latter no heed, Marmeladov went on with his story. By now, he appeared to have lost all strength, but the drunker he became, the more he wanted to talk. The recollection of his recent success at work seemed to have revived him, and had even marked his face with a sort of radiance. Raskolnikov listened attentively.
All this, good sir, happened 5 weeks ago. Yes, the moment those two, Katerina Ivanovna and Sonechka, found out. Goodness, I thought I'd been taken up to heaven. Before, you would lie there like a beast and abuse was all you... Before, you would lie there like a beast and abuse was all you heard. But now they're going round on tiptoe, hushing the little ones. Semyon Zakharich is tired out from work. He's resting. Shh. I was being served coffee before work, and hot cream. Real cream, do you hear? And how they scraped together 11 rubles and 50 kopecks to fit me out so nicely, I'll never know. Boots, magnificent cotton shirt fronts, a new uniform, all tip-top for just 11.50. I walked in after my first morning at work, and what did I find? Katerina Ivanovna had prepared 2 courses, soup and corned beef with horseradish, something we'd never even heard of before then. She doesn't even have a single dress. Not a single one, sir. But now here she was, got up as if to go to a party. Incredible how she does it. Incredible how she makes everything from nothing. The hairdo, a nice clean collar, cuffs, and by the end she looks a completely different person. Younger, prettier. Sonechka, my precious, only assisted with money. It's not proper, she says, for me to come over to your place too often now. Not for a while, anyway. Maybe only at dusk, so nobody sees me. Do you hear? I came home after lunch for 40 winks, and just imagine what I heard then. Only a week before Katerina Ivanovna had had the most almighty row with Amalia Fyodorovna, but here she was inviting her round of coffee. But here she was inviting her round for coffee. 2 hours they sat together, whispering. So now Semyon Zakharich is working and drawing a salary, and he presented himself before His Excellency, and His Excellency came out in person, told everybody else to wait, took Semyon Zakharich by the hand, and led him past everyone to his office. Do you hear? In view of past services, Semyon Zakharich, said His Excellency, and though you succumbed for a time to this frivolous weakness, but as you are now making a promise, and besides we have been doing poorly without you, do you hear? Then I shall count on your word of honor. And she'd made the whole thing up, I tell you, and not out of silliness or just to sing my praises. No, sir. She believes it all herself. She amuses herself with her own imaginations. By heaven. And I do not condemn it. No, this I do not condemn. And when, 6 days ago, I brought home 23 rubles and 40 kopecks, My first salary in its entirety. She even called me her little boy. My clever little boy, she says, and in private, understand. After all, I'm not much to look at and not much of a husband, am I? But no, she pinched my cheek and said, my clever little boy.
Marmeladov paused as if to smile, but his chin suddenly began to quiver. Still he held himself together. This pothouse, his depraved appearance, the fight, the 5 nights on the hay barges, the vodka, and to top it all, this sickly love for wife and family, disorientated his listener. Raskolnikov listened intently, but with a sick feeling. How he wished he hadn't come here.
My good sir, Marmeladov exclaimed, having recovered. Oh, sir! For you, perhaps, as for everyone else, this is all just a joke, and I should really stop bothering you with all the idiotic, pathetic details of my domestic life. But it's no joke to me, for I can feel everything. Throughout the entire course of that one heavenly day, and throughout the entire evening, I, too, was carried away by dreams. How I would arrange everything and clothe the little mites and give her some respite and bring my only begotten daughter back from disgrace into the bosom of the family. And much else besides. Quite forgivable, sir. Well, my good man.
Marmeladov suddenly gave a kind of start, raised his head and stared straight at his listener.
Well, sir, on the very next day, after all these reveries, that is to say, precisely 5 days ago, towards evening, by a clever ruse, like a thief in the night, I stole the key to Katerina Ivanovna's chest, took what remained of the salary. I no longer remember how much. And look at me now, sir. Kaput! My 5th day away from home, and the search party's out, and it's the end of my career. And the uniform, in exchange for which I received these vestments, is in a pothouse by Egypt Bridge. And it's the end of everything.
Marmeladov struck his forehead with his fist, clenched his teeth, shut his eyes, and planted an elbow on the table. But a minute later his face suddenly changed. Glancing at Raskolnikov with an air of slyness and manufactured insolence, he laughed and said,
Today I went to Sonia to beg some money. You know, hair of the dog. Don't tell me she gave it to you, shouted one of the newcomers, then roared with laughter. This very pint of vodka was bought with her money, sir.
Marmeladov went on, addressing himself exclusively to Raskolnikov.
Brought me out 30 kopecks in her own hands, her very last coins. It was all she had. I saw for myself. Didn't say a word, just looked at me in silence. That's how. Up there, not down here. People grieve and weep, but never a word of reproach, not a word. And that hurts even more, sir, when there's no reproach. Yes, sir, that hurts more. 30 kopecks. She'll be needing them herself now, eh? Wouldn't you say, my dear sir? After all, she has to keep herself immaculate. It costs money to be immaculate in that particular way, does it not? Does it not? Then there's lipstick to be bought. No getting away from that, sir. Starched skirts, high-heeled shoes with a touch of class to show a bit of leg when there's a puddle to be crossed. Do you see, sir, what it means to be immaculate? Do you? Well, sir, and there's me, her very own father, swiping these 30 kopecks to clear a sore head. And here I am spending them. In fact, I've already spent them. So who could ever pity a man like me, eh? Do you pity me now, sir, or do you not? Tell me, sir, yea or nay?
He was about to pour another glass, but there was nothing left. The pot was empty.
Pity you? What the hell for? Shouted the landlord,
who had come back down again. There was more laughter and even swearing among those who were listening and even among those who were not. The sight of the retired civil servant was quite enough for them.
Pity me? Why pity me?
Marmeladov suddenly howled, standing up with his arm outstretched before him in an access of inspiration, as though he had been waiting for precisely those words.
Why pity me, you ask? Oh yes, there is nothing to pity me for. I should be crucified. I should be nailed to the cross, not pitied. So crucify, O judge, crucify, and having crucified, take pity. Then I shall come to you myself to be nailed to the rood, for it is not merriment I crave, but sorrow and tears. Do you imagine, O vendor, that this pot of yours brought me pleasure? It was sorrow I sought at its bottom, sorrow and tears, which I did taste and I did find. And he shall pity us who pitied all, who understood all men and all things. He alone, he the judge. He shall come on that day, and he shall ask, where is the daughter who did betray herself for a wicked, consumptive stepmother and infant, alien children? Where is the daughter who did take pity on her mortal father, an obscene drunkard whose brutishness did not appall her? And he will say, come, I forgave thee once. Yes, I forgave thee. Now, too, thy many sins are forgiven, for thou loved much. And he will forgive me, my Sonia. He will. I know he will. I felt it just now when I visited her. I felt it in my heart. He will judge and forgive all, the good and the wicked, the wise and the meek. And when he has finished with them, he will speak unto us too. Come forth, he will say. Even you, come forth the tipsy, come forth the feeble, come forth the shameless. And we shall all come forth without shame, and we shall stand, and he will say, you are swine, marked with the image and the stamp of the beast. Yet even so, come. And the wise and the reasonable shall proclaim, Lord, why takest thou these men? And he will say, I take them, O men of wisdom, O men of reason, because not one of their number did think himself worthy. And he shall reach out his hands to us, and we shall fall down, and we shall weep. And we shall understand all things. All things shall we understand, and all will understand. Even Katerina Ivanovna, she too will understand. May thy kingdom come, O Lord.
Wow, that was super long. Sorry, guys. I didn't mean for it to be that long. I didn't realize just how fucking long it is. But yeah, that was a crazy passage that I had to share with you guys because I thought it was so poignant. Actually, the rest of the chapter still has more to it, but I had to stop there. Hopefully you'll check out this book, Crime and Punishment. It's so far amazing. Like I said, I've only read the first 2 chapters, but it's extremely poignant. And I know I'm going long here, and sorry about that too, but I am just going to go ahead and do the last request. Where is it? I just had it. The translation is excellent. Where the hell is it? This is weird. I don't have Katy Perry on my thing anymore. All right. Maybe I did. Oh, wait. Maybe he sent it to me and I didn't buy it. It might be. Here it is. Yeah, here it is. If I can just access it, be great. Here it is. Okay. Sorry this is taking so long, guys. I will be finished in just a moment. Alright. I have to go unlock my door real quick because I have a visitor that's going to be showing up and I'm going to be in here. I won't be able to let him in. Hoopla. Bing. Okay, here we go. All right, so everybody, I have to warn you that this is Cringe Theater. My guest will show up mid-cringe. This is amazing. Cringe Theater. Make sure that anybody who's not supposed to watch inappropriate stuff goes away now, because Cringe Theater is definitely for inappropriate material. I'm warning you, if you don't want to cringe like crazy, and if you don't want your children and whole family to go insane, do not watch this. For Jason versus Katy Perry has arrived. We just, where we left off, Katy Perry's kitty, what was his name? Kitty Purry, was murdered savagely by Jason. And then Katy Perry kind of got turned on. So, on to chapter 6. This is going to be the end of it, by the way. This is all there is. 6. 4 years earlier, in London, England, Katy Perry was sitting with Kitty Purry at a cafe in Cottingley Ferry Square in Haversham, having a cup of tea.
London is beautiful,
Katy said. But just then, a portly man in brown bowler hat and brown coat stepped up to their table.
I'll gladly pay you Tuesday for a hamburger today,
the man said.
Well, we'll be in London until Thursday night,
Katy Perry said.
So I'll have ample time to collect on my hamburger debt.
Katy Perry reached into her purse and pulled out a hamburger smothered in ketchup. The fat man grabbed the burger and suddenly tossed it into the River Thames with the most practiced nonchalance Katy had ever seen.
I didn't even want the burger,
the fat man said.
I was just making a bit of mischief.
Irk, why would somebody do something like that? It makes no sense.
And that's the chapter. I fucking love this book. 7. Katy Perry walked through the dark woods, naked and confused. How had she come to this point? That day in the suicide hospital, the day after her emptiness had started hurting her heart totally too much, Katy Perry had suggested giving up the superstar scene and going underground. So Katy wrote a country album and recorded it all using the same type of crappy microcassette recorder that Agent Cooper had used on Twin Peaks. Oh, shit. The whole album was just Katy alone with her acoustic guitar, no auto-tune, just her natural voice standing on its own, and Kitty Purry on bass. It worked. She became totally underground, and even hipster people liked her album. And Kitty Purry had suggested Lil Meow Meow as a tour mate after reading an article about him in Ebony magazine for cats. Number 1 kitty rapper, Lil Meow Meow, had been discovered by DJ Jazzy Jeff on a lark after Jeff came across Lil Meow Meow's homemade freestyle videos on YouTube. Jeff produced a record for Lil Meow Meow called Ocean Maniac. It was a themed album that focused on the ocean and being crazy. Katy Perry had been honored when Lil Meow Meow agreed to go on tour with her, but she quickly grew to learn that she was not just the best kitten rapper ever, but also the biggest jerk ever. After all was said and done, the underground career and the tour on Lil Meow Meow not because he was an asshole, but because if doing happy clean things didn't help with that empty feeling, then maybe dirty mean things would. Why not pee-pee on the puff-puff when your heart is living in a black hole anyway? You may as well give up, because once your heart passes the event horizon, the gravity is too strong to escape, and all your dreams and hopes will get sucked into the center of that black hole. The pull of gravity gets so strong, those hopes and dreams get torn up into something less than atoms, molecules too tiny and broken to ever be reintegrated into the fabric of the universe again. And here Katy was, stranded in Crystal Lake with a murderer and a cat who'd fired a crossbow at her pussy. And to top it all off was the rotten fact that she'd seen her best friend split in half like he was a Macintosh apple. What? Katy Perry had been her BFF for life, and now he was gone. But why do I get so wet at Jason's touch? Katy thought. What kind of dirtbag gets wet over the man who killed their best friend? Pull it together, Katy, she told herself. I told y'all I'd catch you later, ho! Lil Meow Meow jumped from a tree branch and did a somersault. He landed directly in front of Katy's feet, and then he kick-flipped himself up until he landed on her boobs and shoved his crossbow into her mouth. But just then, Jason's machete blade came between Katy and Lil Meow Meow, slicing off the paw that held the diamond crossbow. Both Lil Meow Meow and the crossbow fell to the ground, and Lil Meow Meow backed away from Jason, holding his bloody wrist where his left paw used to be. Katy Perry looked at Jason and kissed his mask, and she felt her stomach getting all tingly with butterflies. No, she told herself, I can't do this. He killed Katy Perry. Then Katy ran off into the deep woods, where no moonbeams were strong enough to penetrate the thick wood growth. Jason turned his attention to Lil Meow Meow. You cut my paw off! Lil Meow Meow said. Jason advanced upon Lil Meow Meow with his machete. Lil Meow Meow slipped back into a big brown puddle, falling on his back with his paws in the air. He pulled his wallet out and held it up to Jason. I got $40,000 cash in here, all for you. You could take Katy out to dinner. Just let me live, yo. Jason ran the machete down into Lil Meow Meow's heart, pressing the feline rapper's fuzzy body deep into the mud until he was a brown mush below the water. As Jason pulled his machete out and walked away, Lil Meow Meow's wallet floated in the puddle. His Discover card had fallen out, and it was left floating in the mix of mud and blood. I need water. Katy Perry ran... 8. Katy Perry ran through the woods until she made it back to the highway. She saw the flipped-over Toyota van and was reminded of one of the few good moments she'd had with Lil Meow Meow on the tour, when the puffed-up furball had totally shown a vulnerable side to his kitty self. They'd pulled the van over to get dinner at a drive-in burger place. Katy Perry had been suffering from a tummy ache, so he stayed inside the van. Katy and Lil Meow Meow went to the burger stand together. And both ended up ordering the same thing. A large fries and a large vanilla milkshake. I guess we have one thing in common, yo, Lil Meow Meow said. our eating tastes.
Whatevs, Katy Perry said. Or maybe you're just a copycat.
Chill for a minute, bro, Lil Meow Meow said as they sat at the table. Lil Meow Meow took his chair and turned it around, facing the wrong way. Lil Meow Meow took his chair and turned it around, facing the wrong way, so he could drape his legs over the chair back. Let's you and me have a rap session.
Sorry,
Katy Perry said after biting off the tip of a French fry.
I'm a singer, not a rapper.
Then she dumped some salt on her fries, followed with a few big squirts of ketchup. Know something? Lil Meow Meow said. I could help y'all.
You help me?
Laughed Katy Perry.
That'll be the day.
Take your French fries, for example.
What about my fries?
You're doing the ketchup all wrong.
There's no wrong way to put ketchup on fries,
Katy Perry said. It's the salt that's wrong, B, Lil Meow Meow said. You gotta salt the ketchup, not the fries. That way you control what amount of salt gets on each fry. Katy Perry salted her ketchup and took a bite of her fry.
You're right. Now it's not like the salt is all over the place.
You know, Lil Meow Meow said, it's like this salt. It's like the way you were doing it was how some science people, like your British boy back in the van, they think the universe is all out of order, like salt sprinkled all over fries. I can't accept that. The way I see it is, the universe is like that salt sprinkled on ketchup. Something's holding it all together, B. And it ain't science. This is so ridiculous.
You can be pretty deep sometimes,
Katy Perry said. And anyone who loves vanilla milkshakes can't be all bad. Oh, sorry.
And anyone who loves vanilla milkshakes can't be all bad.
Katy Perry giggled. Then Lil Meow Meow got a sad look on his kitty face, and a single teardrop fell from his left eye. I wish I knew what vanilla milkshakes tasted like, friend.
Is your tongue broken or something?
Katy Perry said. Nah, B, Lil Meow Meow said. Cats can't taste sweetness. Their kitty tongues don't have the taste buds for it. Maybe your science friend probably read a book about it. He probably thinks it has something to do with being pure carnivores, some kind of science or evolution. I think it's just God punishing us for coming out meowing the day we were born.
So, why do you order milkshakes if you can't taste the sweetness? Isn't that like the whole point of milkshakes?
Katy Perry said. It's like this, yo, Lil Meow Meow said. I like to pretend like I'm sitting here like I'm one of you white people. Some rich-ass cracker grew up in a mansion with 2 parents, someone that don't know what it's like to have some whack-ass empty feeling inside their hearts. I drink that milkshake and I'll taste that sweetness up here in my mind's eye, somewhere in some kind of white people fantasy world. I'm tasting that sweet vanilla sugar, B, and maybe for that one moment, I'm alright, yo. Too full of milkshake and french fries to feel that emptiness.
White people can have some kind of emptiness in their hearts, too, Katy Perry said. It's not like kittens have a corner on the loneliness market.
Then, Katy stopped staring at the Toyota van. Stopped remembering Lil Meow Meow. There'd be time for mourning if she made it through the night, but now was the time for safety and escape. The time to hitch a ride away from Camp Blood and that dangerous maniac, Jason Voorhees.
Katy Voorhees,
she sighed.
What the heck is wrong with me?
Katy Perry said.
I can't be in love with a monster killer in a hockey mask. I mean, he lives in a lake, and he's totally not my type.
Don't get all hung up on this type shite, chap. True love doesn't have types. True love isn't like science. There's no proper order to the doings of the heart.
OMG!
Katy Perry said.
Katy Perry, it's you!
Actually, dear lass, Katy Perry said. "I am the ghost of Katy Perry. I came here from heaven to stop you from making a mistake."
"What do you mean?"
"What's done is done, by Jove," Katy Perry said. "I lived a good life, mostly because of you. Do not go off into this dark night making a bunch of fanfare over my murder. It's rubbish. There's something there with you and this Jason chap. Some ether my whiskers picked up in the ghostly air. I'm no Richard Feynman, but I have a theory that true love is made of particles, the kind that are there at the moment the CO2 blood enters the heart." Sorry, guys.
"What am I supposed to do, Katy Perry?"
Katy Perry said. "You already know what to do," Katy Perry said. "The Katy I know would never run away from a chance at true love."
"Thank you, Katy Perry,"
Katy Perry said.
"I'll miss you."
"Ciao, friend," Katy Perry's ghostly figure said, before rising up back into the stars and becoming one with the ether. 9. Katy Perry ran back into the woods, back towards Jason. One second.
I'm almost done. I'm doing Katy Perry versus Jason right now, if you want to come listen. Yes.
Nine. Katy Perry ran back into the woods, back towards Jason. She heard laughing and giggling from off in the distance, and loud music. It was that crappy song Starlight by that shitty band Muse. Katy ran to where the music was coming from and saw Jason being hit by a brown Mercury Sable. It was the brown Mercury Sable's hi-fi stereo system that was playing Starlight. Jason was lying on the ground, struggling to get up, still holding his machete. The doors of the brown Mercury Sable popped open, and out stepped that weird psychokinetic girl Tina and her denim jacket-wearing boyfriend Nick. Katy glared at Nick, and in the bright moonlight that was almost like sunlight, Katy noticed that Nick used a ton of hair gel in his hair. He was just like all the guys with hair on their heads who'd left her, each one walking away with some tiny part of her, eventually leaving that empty space that had made her totally suicidal. Jason suddenly got up holding his machete, and Tina shouted,
"Not so fast, Jason. My psychometric powers have grown stronger over the years. Nick, hold my hand and stand beside me. Your love only makes me more powerful."
"Sure thing, babe," Nick said as he clutched Tina's hand in his own. "Closing time, Jason," Nick laughed. "Camp Crystal Lake's going on a permanent hiatus. Tina's back in town." Tina sent a psychometric force blast that flung Jason's machete out of his hand and flung it until it was embedded in a tree right near where Katy was hiding. Then Tina scrunched her face up in concentration.
"You should have stayed in the lake, Voorhees," Tina said.
Katy watched as a tree branch began to move on its own, like a snake, and wrapped itself around Jason's neck and lifting him off the ground. Katy watched the branch strangle Jason and start.
Thanks, Katy Perry. Thanks, Katy Perry,"
Katy Perry said. Katy ran up to the tree and yanked the machete out of the wood. Then she ran up behind Tina and Nick. And Katy Perry guessed that Starfire must have been playing on repeat, because it started playing again. It was a lame song, and she swung the machete into Tina's neck, slicing all the way through until the blade came to a rest on Nick's neck, and Katy kept going with the blade until it passed through Nick's neck, cutting off his head.
"Double play!"
Katy Perry screamed.
"You're out!"
Katy Perry made a hand signal like a baseball umpire to signify that they had struck out. Then the branch let go of Jason's neck, and he crashed to the dirt the same moment Nick and Tina's heads and bodies did. Katy Perry ran to Jason and hugged him. His blue work coveralls were torn, but otherwise he looked all right. Jason picked Katy's naked body up in his arms while holding the machete in a hand that was sticking out from under her butt. Then she turned to face him and pressed his Then she turned her to face him and pressed his mask against her lips. Last chapter. All right, where is it? 10. It wasn't dark anymore, because of all the moonlight. But it's not moonlight anymore, thought Katy. It's starlight. Katy Perry felt Jason's machete grate against her boob as he carried her toward the lake. Katy Perry looked up at the stars and thought she saw a constellation shaped like Kitty Purry. She waved up at the sky in her imagination, sending the wave out mentally like telekinesis. "Bye, Kitty Purry." But the Kitty Purry stars did not wave back to her. And then Katy thought no more about emptiness or dead kitties, or for her there was only the starlight reflecting off the surface of Crystal Lake, and Jason's love. And that's it, guys. That's Jason versus Katy Perry. Amazing. Thank you so much, Kitty Glitter, for requesting that one. I hope you're writing more because we need more for this show. Cringe Theater is forever propped up by your writings. So anyway, this was a super long one, guys. Sorry about that. I should have like edited that Dostoevksy a little bit more to like I don't know. That might have been an hour. Holy shit. But yeah, that's it for today. Thanks for tuning in and hanging out with us. Go buy the books that I have been reading. And also, Wednesday, I am going to be doing a Sound Booth Theater Live for Delvers 2. So be sure to join us for that, and I will see you then.